In this video, we will share some exclusive information on how to repair modern smart TV. Make sure to watch until the end and don't skip any part. Otherwise, you might miss something important and fail to repair your TV. The TV mainboard is actually the second most expensive part of the television, especially when it's a smart TV. Compared to older LCD or LED TVs, the mainboard in modern smart TV are less durable. Why? Because they are packed with more complex features like the built-in Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 3D support and more. And here is the thing. These newer mainboards are now just as likely to fail as the power supply or backlight. In fact, many technicians, when they face mainboard issues, only check a few components and give up. Either they replace the board entirely or they return the smart TV if the mainboard is out of stock or too expensive. But this approach wastes both time and money for the technician and the customer. That's why it is so important to diagnose the problem properly before rushing to replace the mainboard. Now I am going to describe why the smart TV won't turn on, no red light blinking. If your smart TV has no power, no front LED light, no sound, no display, start by checking the power supply unit or PSU. Is the PSU outputting any voltage at all? If there is no voltage, disconnect the connector between the PSU and the mainboard. Then check for a standby voltage, usually 3.3 volts or 5 volts. If still no standby voltage, the problem is with the power supply board, not the main board. But if you do see standby voltage and there is no PS on signal coming from the main board, then the issue is likely with the main board. Before jumping to the conclusions, test the front panel buttons and the remote. If neither can turn the TV on, then yes, the mainboard is probably faulty. Let's dig deeper. When this kind of the mainboard issues shows up, trace the path from the standby voltage to the main chip or MCU. Most modern TV combine the CPU and the MCU into the one chip. The issues could lie in the LDO IC, DC-DC converter IC, registers, or even break in the circuit path. Now check if the LDO and the DC-DC circuits are supplying stable voltage like 5 volt, 3.3 volt, 2.5 volt, 1.8 volt or 1.26 volt. Sometimes 0.9 volt or core voltage. If those all are good, and next check the CPU, reset the circuit and its crystal oscillator circuit. Still no luck? Then inspect the data bus line, labeled SDA and SCL. This connect to the CPU, flash memory, tuner, audio IC and more. Make sure there is no short circuit caused by any of the components connected to this line. Next, check the DDR RAM and the flash memory. Start by making sure the RAM is getting the correct power, and this is called the VCC voltage. Also, don't forget to check the reference voltage or the VREF. Different generations of the DDR RAM use the different voltage. Suppose first generation uses 2.5 volts with a 1.25 volt reference, and second generation needs 1.8 volt and 0.9 volt reference. Third generation runs on the 1.5 volt with the 0.75 volt reference. Most newer TV use the second or the third generation DDR RAM, which usually comes in the BGA chip format. Now look at the small registers called the SMD network registers between the DDR RAM and the CPU. If any of these are open, have the incorrect values or shows the leakage, the TV might not power on. Also gently touch the RAM chip. If it feels very hot, it could be defective and needs replacing. Flash memory issues can be caused by either the faulty firmware or a defective memory chip. In Smart TV, the firmware is usually split into two parts. The first part is the boot firmware, called the bootloader, also known as the M boot or the U boot. This is typically stored in the small series flash chip and often labeled as a 25 series chip. The second part is the main firmware, which is stored in the large memory chip like the NAND flash or the eMMC. If you think the bootloader is corrupted, try updating the boot firmware first and see that fix the issues. You can also use a universal programmer to reopen the bootloader with a good working version of the firmware. Important tip: always back up the original firmware before reading or writing anything of the flash chip. Reprogramming does not solve the problem. It's the best to replace the 25 series flash chip with a new one and load the correct bootloader firmware onto. Keep in mind, in some TV, the bootloader may be stored in the larger eMMC chip instead of the separate flash chip. Finally, if none of the previous steps work, the issue might be with the main chip or the CPU. And here is a simple way to check. When the TV is in standby mode, gently touch the surface of the CPU. It should feel slightly warm. Once the TV powers on, the CPU should get noticeably hotter. Now, if the CPU gets too hot quickly while still in standby mode, it could be shorter. On the other hand, if there is no change in the temperature at all, even after trying to power on, then it might be a dry joint issue under the chip. This is common with BGA type CPU, where tiny shoulder point under the chip may not be making proper contact. One trick you can try is pressing the gently on the CPU while powering on the TV. If the board shows any sign of life, there's a strong hint there is a cold shoulder joint underneath. In case you may need to reheat, resolder, or even the reball CPU to restore the proper connections. Also, don't forget to check the front keypad and the IR or infrared sensor circuits. These connect to the MCU or main chip. Look for any sign of damage, leakage, or open circuits in these components or their paths. While it is a rare issue, problems in this area can still prevent the TV from turning on, so it is worth checking. So let's recap. Don't rush to replace the mainboard, run proper diagnostic. Check the PSU and the standby voltage. Then trace through the LDO, DCC circuits, RAM, flash memory, and communication lines. Reflash firmware if needed. Consider reflowing the CPU if all else fails. By taking the time to diagnose your TV the right way, and you can save money, avoid unnecessary parts replacement, and even revive the seemingly dead TVs. That's what smart repair is all about. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more pro repair tips. Got a questions or stuck on a repair? Drop it in the comments. We are here to help you. See you in the next video. Bye bye.